The first day I moved into my dream lake house, I thought I was stepping into a peaceful, sun-soaked paradise. I imagined quiet mornings sipping coffee on the dock, the water shimmering, and the gentle hum of nature as my soundtrack. But I didn't expect my paradise to be raided by the HOA. Yes, you heard that right. Within hours of unloading my last box, a group of impeccably dressed people showed up, clipboards in hand, marching down my private dock like they owned the place. And let me tell you, nothing prepares you for that moment, the sight of perfectly polished shoes splashing through your own mud, smug faces surveying your property. "Excuse me," the leader of the pack began, adjusting her oversized sunglasses. "We're here to discuss the lake access. You can't possibly occupy the entire dock area. It's community property." I blinked, trying to process the absurdity. Community property? I literally owned every dock they used, every single dock. But watching them stride around, making notes as if they were conducting a public survey, I realized they didn't know that, and the tension. They expected me to back down politely. I tried to remain calm, giving them a neutral smile. "Actually," I said, "you're on private property. Every dock you're standing on belongs to me." Cue the gasp. I swear one of them looked like they had just seen a ghost. Or maybe that was the shock of realizing their HOA membership fees didn't magically grant them ownership of my property. "Oh, we'll see about that," one of them muttered, though mostly to herself, glancing around as if the trees might suddenly support their claim. By this point, I realized I needed a plan. Calm confrontation wouldn't work here. They thrived on intimidation. And that's when I started thinking creatively, like really creatively. The lake wasn't just mine. It was my stage, my arena, my own private soap opera waiting to unfold. Little did they know, the showdown had just begun. And by the end of the week, I'd turned their entire sense of authority upside down, without lifting a single threatening finger. Trust me, this story isn't about petty revenge. It's about reclaiming space, standing your ground, and, well, having a little fun while doing it. The next morning, I woke up to the soft glow of sunrise over my lake, thinking about how peaceful it would be to enjoy a quiet breakfast on the dock. But of course, peace doesn't seem to stick around when an HOA is involved. By 9 a.m., I noticed subtle signs that they hadn't left quietly. Tire tracks near my property line, the sound of whispered discussions, and, oddly enough, the faint echo of someone measuring something. Curiosity got the better of me, so I stepped outside, coffee in hand, only to see them walking along my docks like it was a communal boardwalk. I had to bite back a laugh, the sheer confidence on their faces, completely unaware that every inch they were standing on was mine. I decided it was time for some subtle reminders. "Good morning," I called out cheerfully. "Enjoying the dock? Remember, all of these belong to me." They froze. One woman, clipboard clutched like a shield, narrowed her eyes. We didn't realize—" "Of course you didn't," I interrupted gently. "It's understandable. These docks look public, but technically they're not." I could see the gears turning in their heads, and I knew the real fun was about to begin. They started debating amongst themselves, trying to figure out how they could claim usage without actually owning the land. It was almost adorable, like watching puppies argue over who gets the bigger piece of steak. I strolled down the dock, letting them get closer, then casually pointed to a tiny sign I had put up earlier. "Private property. All docks owned by my name." "Oh, well, this is awkward," one muttered, glancing nervously at the others. This was my moment. Not a moment of confrontation, but one of quiet, calculated power. I walked along, making small talk, letting the absurdity sink in. How could they not realize that years of HOA rules didn't magically override property deeds? I could almost hear their minds breaking. "We've been managing lake access for decades. And now what?" By midday, I had them questioning everything, where boundaries were, who actually paid for what, and whether their entire system was built on assumptions rather than fact. I even offered them coffee, smiling innocently, while inside I was reveling in the irony. They were storming in, thinking they could claim my lake, and now they were completely lost on my property. It was strangely satisfying. I didn't need a dramatic showdown yet, just a little chaos and confusion. Let them stew a little. Let them realize that owning property is more than paying HOA fees. Little did they know this was only the beginning. My lake, my rules, but I was just warming up. And the next move? Well, let's just say the docks weren't the only thing they'd be dealing with. By the third day, the HOA seemed determined to assert some sort of control over my lake, and I realized it was time to push the boundaries. Literally. I had been enjoying their confusion, but now they were getting cocky, striding around my docks as if ownership were negotiable. It was time to remind them who really held the cards. I started small, rearranging the dock layout overnight. New signs appeared. Private property. Do not trespass. No HOA allowed without permission. All carefully crafted to annoy but remain legal. Then I placed some subtle obstacles. A floating log here. A harmless but noticeable rope there. By morning, the HOA arrived to find their path blocked and their stride disrupted. "Is this ours?" one of them asked, pointing at the log floating in the water. I strolled down the dock, acting oblivious. "Actually, it's mine. Thought it might make the lake more interesting for visitors." Their collective gasp was priceless. They had come thinking authority alone would intimidate me. But now, every footstep on my property was a calculated reminder that I was in control. I could see them quietly strategizing among themselves, though every glance at me reminded them this was my stage. But I didn't stop there. I introduced a few more characters into the mix. My cows. Yes, the same cows that had been grazing peacefully nearby. I allowed them to wander close to the docks, giving the HOA just enough scare to reconsider any bold moves. It was subtle, but effective. One committee member screamed when a curious cow approached her clipboard, clearly not expecting farm animals to enforce lake rules. The real coup came mid-afternoon. I grabbed my manure loader, just for show, and parked it in full view of the docks. Not threateningly, of course, but enough to ensure my cows had backup. I watched from the porch as their leader's eyes widened, trying to calculate the absurdity of the situation. A homeowner, cows, and a manure loader acting as the ultimate property patrol. By now, the HOA had slowed to a crawl, walking carefully, whispering about boundaries, laws, and insurance. They were clearly out of their depth, and I was having the time of my life. It wasn't just about defending my property, it was about asserting clever, harmless dominance. By sunset, they retreated to their cars, muttering about paperwork and bylaws. I poured myself a drink on the porch, watching the water shimmer as my cows grazed peacefully. My lake, my docks, my rules. And the HOA? Well, they had learned the hard way. Trespassing on my property came with creative consequences. By the fourth day, the HOA seemed exhausted, confused, and honestly a little terrified. Their attempts to assert control had slowed to timid inspections, quiet whispers, and endless debates over rules that didn't apply. And that, my friends, was my moment to cement victory. Not with anger, but with style. I woke up early, the lake mist curling over the water like a movie scene, and walked down to my docks. My cows followed naturally. Today wasn't about confrontation. It was about showing the HOA that the lake, every dock, and even every ripple of water belonged entirely to me. Soon enough, the HOA appeared again, but this time they were cautious, hesitant, their clipboards clutched like life rafts. I greeted them with a warm, almost innocent smile. "Morning! I hope you're enjoying the docks today," I said. One of them whispered to another, clearly debating whether to step onto the wood at all. I didn't interrupt. I let them stew. Then I casually demonstrated the obvious. I opened the dock nearest to them for easy access, but only for those who asked politely. The subtle message? Respect my property, and I might just let you in. Next, I added a little theatrical flair. I positioned my cows in strategic spots, allowing them to wander near the docks while I operated the manure loader, just enough to make it clear that I could intervene at any moment. It was hilarious watching their faces go from determination to panic, then slowly morph into reluctant amusement. Finally, I presented them with a gentle, undeniable fact. You've been storming in thinking you own access, but legally, every dock, every inch of this lakefront is mine. You can make rules all you want, but they don't apply here. The silence was golden. They shuffled, murmured, and realized that arguing would achieve nothing. Slowly, they packed up. No dramatic exit, just a quiet retreat. Victory wasn't loud. It was subtle, clever, and honestly a little satisfying. As they drove away, I laughed, watching my cows graze peacefully by the water. My docks were untouched, my lake serene, and my property respected. And the HOA? They had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes authority doesn't come from bylaws, meetings, or intimidation. It comes from knowing what you own and standing firm, with just enough humor to make the lesson stick. By sunset, the lake reflected the sky perfectly, undisturbed except for my cows and the gentle ripples from the docks. I poured myself a drink, leaned back, and enjoyed the moment. The HOA had stormed in, demanding what wasn't theirs, and in the end, they left without a single victory. Enjoying this wild showdown with the HOA over my lake and docks? Hit that subscribe button to catch more real-life stories of property wins, clever comebacks, and hilarious chaos. Give this video a like if you got a kick out of the cow antics, and drop a comment below. What would you do if an HOA stormed your backyard?